Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, the sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com, along as well. A lot to get to on this SEC championship game preview edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. Our Twitter feed, Talkin_Tide. Get immediate links to all of our podcasts right there, twice weekly throughout the football season. We are live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. You can find us on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you prefer to get your podcasting. You can find Talkin Tide. I want to thank Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa and Heat Pizza Bar, two fine local sponsors of the Talkin Tide podcast. More on both of those fine establishments later in the program. But first, we dive right in, Travis, here in this midweek edition to preview Alabama and Georgia in the SEC title game. Of course, your reset on that one, it'll be a 4 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. Central time kickoff on Saturday. CBS broadcast, Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. And the stage is set, Travis, for an epic tilt that'll have the eyes of the nation upon it.
It absolutely will, in a town that has been very, very good to the Alabama Crimson Tide under Nick Saban. 8 SEC titles for Alabama under Nick, and of course, all 8 of those wins took place in either the Georgia Dome or Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And just looking specifically at this series with Georgia, whether it's been Atlanta or Athens, the last 6 trips over there for Alabama have gone pretty much the way of the Crimson Tide.
No doubt about it. And of course, most recently, a couple of years ago, Alabama knocked off Georgia in the SEC title game. And then Georgia turned around, beat Alabama in the national championship game. That's where this 29-game win streak for the Bulldogs got started. Alabama handed Georgia their most recent loss exactly 2 years ago. So it kind of comes full circle now. Alabama, Travis, kind of the narrative on Alabama, Travis, pretty much ever since that national championship loss to Georgia has been, hey, this program is in a decline, a slow decline, a gradual decline, but a decline nonetheless. But here we are 2 years later, and everybody else Georgia has played has had their crack and failed. And now it's Alabama with a shot to come full circle and bring the Dogs down.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't come as a surprise because when you look at these two teams in a lot of ways, they're mirror images. Obviously, we know the coaching ties and the storylines there with Kirby and Nick, and then even moving into the Georgia staff from that perspective. But just the way they're built, the way they recruit, the way they develop, the way they have started to cherry pick the transfer portal the last couple of years. It all lines up. So it makes perfect sense that if someone is going to end this Georgia winning streak this season, and this may be it. I know people are going to tell me Michigan or some other. No. I think this is the best chance for someone to knock off Georgia before the 2024 season.
All right, we'll dive right in now to nuts and bolts, X's and O's. We'll start with that Alabama offense versus the Georgia defense. Travis, first and foremost, thoughts from me. Can Alabama run the football against this Georgia defense? It's absolutely going to be critical for Alabama, I think, to have some balance offensively. We've seen Alabama run the ball effectively in some pretty good games, maybe not dominantly, but effectively. And that's going to be crucial, I think. And another factor, too, I think, is that the Georgia pass rush and this other factor, I think, probably could favor Alabama a little bit. There's really not a bell cow pass rusher on this Georgia defense, right? They've had 26 sacks, which is not a great number for 12 games. And it's been sacks by committee, right? It's not like there's one guy with 10 or 12 for the Bulldogs. It's kind of what you want if you're Alabama, right? Because Alabama's had some issues in pass protection, especially early in the season. They've cleaned some of that up. But between the two things that stand out for me, Alabama offensively, One, they got to be able to run the ball at least decently, if not really well. And they got to be able to protect Jalen Milroe. And I think this is a game that they could do it if they run their protections right.
Yeah, I think the balance within the run game is going to be fascinating to watch play out too. Is it going to be Roydell Williams, Jace McClellan, if he's able to go with that foot, Jam Miller, maybe you get into Justice Haynes. What do you get from your backs? And not just in terms of rushing yards, scrimmage yards. This is one of those kind of games too. Can you throw it to your backs successfully? Not a big running back receiving team. But Alabama's had success on occasion. More so, though, you talk about kind of the lack of Georgia's edge pass rush. They'll bring those linebackers though, and so from a protection standpoint, if Jace can't go, I think you still feel pretty good about Roydell Williams. He is a physical dude. He's a guy that's been around, so he has that age and maturity to him that should help him hold up in that regard. But within the run game, how dependent are you on Jalen Milroe's legs? Can you get enough out of your backs to sort of balance things out? I think that's a question for both these teams going into this game.
Yeah, I don't see a big difference between McClellan and Roydell Williams in terms of carrying the football. I do think McClellan's a little bit more consistent in pass protection, and that always plays a role, especially against the blitz, because it's that fifth guy coming that a lot of times you need the running back to take care of. Which is not to say that Roydell Williams can't protect the passer, because he can. I do think McClellan's a little bit more consistent about it. And one factor, too, to mention, Travis, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, the outstanding Georgia linebacker, dealing with a broken arm. He's week to week. Kirby Smart, quite coy this week about his availability. We'll see if he's able to go. And as with a lot of injuries this late in the season, whether you're talking about McClellan or Dumas-Johnson or a Ladd McConkey or whoever, sometimes it's not so much will they or won't they go, but how effective will they be if they go?
Yeah, this is essentially a college football playoff game. We can call it the SEC championship game, but for both these teams, that's what it essentially boils down to. And so in that scenario, everyone that can possibly give it a go in this game is going to do everything they can to start the game by being involved, as you said. Now, from that point forward, it becomes more of an issue maybe for a couple of these guys. So totally expect Brock Bowers to play. Totally expect Ladd McConkey to play. Totally expect Ra Thomas to play for Georgia. For Alabama, I got to think that Jace McClellan, at least in pregame warmups, is going to be out there seeing exactly what he can do on that foot. But I also agree, this could be more of a Roydell Williams kind of game, especially stylistically, the way that he runs. One cut, get what you can get, because I don't think this is going to be a game of explosive runs for running backs. I don't think that's Kendall Milton's game for Georgia. I don't think that's Dejon Edwards' game for Georgia. And I think for Alabama's backs, it's going to be, if there's 4 to 5 yards for you to get, go get the 4 to 5, because there's a good chance if there's explosives for Alabama, they're going to come from the quarterback position.
Two, probably worth noting, Travis, that when it comes to the short yardage game, I think Alabama kind of leans toward Roydell in a lot of ways. And you see that with the way they line up the tush-push formation. They've got Jamarian Miller and Roydell in the backfield, with Miller and Oots kind of lined up catacorner to Milroe, and then Williams in the backfield. I think this staff feels real good about Roydell Williams in the 3rd and 1s, and if necessary, the 4th and 1s.
Yeah, they trusted him on that 4th and 1 in the 4th quarter at Auburn, right, to go get that yard. And that was some nice execution in that tush-push formation that they audibled out of the sneak and into the toss to. So, yeah, again, Roydell's, he's been in it, for a few years now. These are guys, and Jace and Roydell Williams, they were part of a national championship team in 2020. So, I like Roydell in a game like this. I'm not saying he's going to have a big day, maybe statistically, but when it comes to ball security, when it comes to pass protection, when it comes to picking up short yardage opportunities, whether it's red zone, whether it's third downs, which both of those will be huge in this game, I would think. You feel pretty good about him.
Throwing the football for Alabama with Jalen Milroe, Travis. We've seen Milroe get a lot of mileage with the verticals outside the numbers, particularly with Jermaine Burton as well. We've seen a lot of C.J. Dupree, Malik Benson inside the numbers, inside the hashes with dig routes over the middle and so forth. How do you see? Where do you see Georgia's defense maybe being most vulnerable against the pass? Is it the deep shot with the vertical stuff, or is it in the middle of the field where you can get more matchups against linebackers and safeties?
Yeah, I think it's a couple different ways. I still like Isaiah Bond inside working against these sub package defensive backs, and that could be Tyke Smith for Georgia this week. A really good tackler, by the way. I think Kamari Lassiter and Malachi Starks, when I look at the Georgia secondary, Lassiter, the corner from Tuscaloosa. Malachi Starks has been an outstanding player in each of his 2 seasons. I think that's where I look to the biggest challenges maybe for Alabama. So yeah, that's what I would think. And then for all the talk about Brock Bowers, Alabama's got a couple of X factor guys too. Amari Niblack from the tight end position, and also Kendrick Law. And the different things that Alabama started to do with him, and the quick game, the easy touches that they're able to get him out on the perimeter. Those are a couple of guys, sort of the utility type players that Georgia has in Bowers and Dylan Bell. Those are the kind of guys that can decide a lot of this on Saturday too.
Yeah, I had somebody tap me on the shoulder. A reporter nudged me during the Iron Bowl on the plains this past Saturday, who'd seen Alabama play a game or two, but not all year. And he said, "Is Kendrick Law Alabama's Deebo Samuel?" And what I told him was, I said, he doesn't get Deebo touches, but he kind of plays that Deebo role,
He
right?
does. Wears the same number. So it would make a lot of sense that you would draw those comparisons. And he is. I mean, he's a hybrid type player. That's what he is. He's a utility type player. And again, some of the same things that Georgia will do with Brock Bowers. Alabama, to a little bit of a different extent, does with Kendrick Law. Certainly not the targets and the touches for Kendrick that you're going to see for Brock Bowers, but maybe more along the lines of Dylan Bell, who Georgia uses in a pretty similar fashion.
All right, the Alabama defense going against the Georgia offense. We'll turn to that conversation really quickly. Phenomenal year for Carson Beck as a first-year starter at quarterback for Georgia. Travis, he's hitting 73% of his passes as a completion rate. Protection-wise, Georgia's been outstanding. He's only been sacked 10 times in 12 games, less than once per game. So, that Georgia offensive line has really been an engine up front for the Bulldogs. And speaking of that, get this now, Georgia, I didn't realize this until I just saw it earlier today. Georgia's 57% for the year on third down, Travis. Yeah. That's outrageous.
They are. And well, a lot of that is they're able to stay on schedule. I don't think they get in a lot of third downs, maybe relative to a lot of teams in the Southeastern Conference. And if they do, they're probably favorable thirds. They're not living in 3rd and 8 in this offense. So,
right.
A couple of things to consider there. But absolutely, that's where it's going to be critical for Alabama on early downs to get the job done against the run, but not just the run, but the quick passing game. Georgia likes to throw the quick screens and try to get those type of quick throws out to the perimeter and see what you got under your hood as far as edge setting with your corners and maybe your sub package guys like Malachi Moore, Caleb Downs. And then when they do throw it, a lot of times they've set it up in a way where they're going to have a good bit of success. But again, some question marks with those receivers between Bowers and McConkey and Ra Thomas, and exactly who Georgia's going to have available. I think it's been a really good thing for the Dogs that they went to the portal in the offseason that they did, because Dom Lovett coming in from Missouri has been pretty productive with 49 catches, 552 yards, and 3 touchdowns. But, we'll see how some of these guys, in terms of availability, are able to contribute for UGA.
It's been a balanced offense for Georgia, no question about it. The running game for Georgia, fairly similar production-wise to Alabama. I think Georgia averages about 185 a game running the ball. Alabama not far off of that, 175, 178, I think, in that neighborhood for the Crimson Tide. But, stopping the run is going to be big. And Alabama, of course, Travis, is coming off a game where they just got exposed on the ground by Auburn. The Tigers at home ran for, I don't know, 250, 260, whatever it was against Alabama. That can't happen against Georgia. So, if you're Georgia, you watch that tape, you got to think, hey, we can pick up a lot of mileage on the ground. If you're Alabama, on the other hand, you watch that Auburn tape and you say, well, this is the first thing defensively we better shore up. I think Auburn maybe exposed a few things for the Alabama coaching staff as far as what they need to focus on in practice.
Yeah, I think a little different kind of backs too, from Auburn to Georgia. When I think of Hunter and Austin, I think of guys that are probably at their best working those perimeter runs that were so problematic for Alabama early in the game. Not just the perimeter runs either, because, Hunter hit a big one off an interior run. But for the most part, I think Edwards and Milton for Georgia are going to probably be at their best when working more between the tackles. So I just don't think there's going to be a bunch of surprises in this one, man. I think both of these teams just kind of look at each other and say, we got great players, we got elite talent, and we're going to have a wrinkle or two in there this week. I'm sure both teams will have something like that, but they trust themselves and their people and their systems enough that here it is. Let's see if you can stop it.
Yeah, the interior defensive line for Alabama, starting with Tim Keenan, and Jaheim Otis plays that in spot, but he's a big part of that interior defense too, because he's not coming around the edge.
Got to stay in the gaps. Got to stay in the gaps this week. There's guys jumping out of gaps last week. There were guys that were in gaps, missed gaps. You got to be a lot more sound this week than you were last week.
All right, moving on, Travis. The Vegas man has the Georgia Bulldogs favored by 5.5 points. In this one, the over-under 54.5. Your thoughts on both of those numbers?
I guess I like the under by just a little bit. The score I'm thinking, I'm thinking first to 27 or 28 wins this game. So maybe a 27, 28, 24 kind of total.
Right.
For 52, 51 points. So I would be under that. And I think Alabama covers the 5.5. Georgia may very well win the game, but I don't think it's going to be by a touchdown or more. I think it's going to be, tight for 60 minutes.
I like Alabama to cover that 5.5 too. I think that over comes in. I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring. We'll see what happens. I know both of these coaches tend to play a little more conservative, I think, in some of these bigger games with high stakes, and that would lend itself to the under. But I just got a feeling this thing might be a little bit more of a shootout. We'll see what happens. Ticket Man, Travis, he's loving this one. The upper deck seats right now in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Of course, this is just online. These are people trying to get what they can get. The number falls usually around game time. But the upper deckers, Travis, around 350 to 450. And the boys with prime seats, Travis, they're asking $2K a seat for this one. Do they get it?
But we got this recession on. I got to do for me and mine. Yeah, right. You can't tell it by what people are willing to pay for college football tickets. I get it, man. It's the Southern Super Bowl at least. It feels like 2012 in a lot of ways too. It feels like whoever wins this game is going to have a great shot to just go on and win it all. If Alabama wins and can get in the college football playoff. But I totally get it. It's a great venue. It is the best matchup in college football and has been for more than a few years now. And also, you haven't seen them since that 2021 season. Didn't see them play last year, Haven't seen
Right.
them so far this year. It's not a rematch. All those things combined to help the ticket man a pretty good bit.
Ticket man will like it. As far I don't know the answer to that. As far as you know, Travis, is that 1992 deal where if you bought tickets, you could basically grab a PSL, right, a
Yeah.
permanent seat
I
license,
know people that
and
still
get them
have
at
them.
face value. So they're still doing that.
I think they are. I knew some friends of ours that live in Knoxville. It was a Florida Tennessee couple, and
Mm-hmm.
all those years ago, their families bought them before the '92
Mm-hmm.
game. And best I can recall, or maybe they changed it when they went to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but I can tell you through the Tebow years at Florida and into the kind of teens of the 2000s, they were doing it. And even if their teams didn't make it, they were selling them, and making money off of that deal.
Right. I'll tell you what. The dumbest thing I ever did was not buy four for
Yeah.
that 1992 game, because if you bought four for that one and you decided, yeah, I'll sign the deal, I'll take face value tickets every year to the SEC championship game. Hell, it's been 30 years now.
Yeah.
You're talking about a retirement nugget if you just sell four year after year and roll that over. Are you kidding me?
Well, and especially with what I spent on just the 2008, 2009 Alabama Florida games in the SEC
Mm-hmm.
championships. Yeah. That's a point where I was really wishing I had done the buy ahead all those years ago.
You know, Tex Tider is a fan of the show, Travis, when he drops in with a never trust a whole lot.
RUNOFT.
Love it. Love it. All right. The Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Moving on, we're going to thank a couple of sponsors really quick. We're going to start by telling you all about Heat Pizza Bar and that fantastic pizza that Frank Fleming and his staff are serving up at 2250 6th Street over in Government Square in Tuscaloosa. Full bar, flat screens all over the place with all the top sports going on. Great location, plenty of parking in that public parking garage right behind the pizza bar. You can't beat it. I'm going to tell you about a couple of pizzas that we don't usually mention here, but they bear mention. The Greek pizza is one of the specialty pizzas over at Heat Pizza Bar. It's got a balsamic vinaigrette base, house-baked chicken, red onion, grape tomato, green bell pepper, Kalamata olives, banana pepper, mozzarella, and feta cheese. Can't beat that. Also, the Aloha pizza, house red sauce, ham, pineapple, jalapeno, red onion, and mozzarella. You can't beat that one either over at Heat Pizza Bar. Be sure to check them out again, 2250 6th Street in Government Square Plaza. Fantastic pizza, the best in town. Great sides, great salads, and a great atmosphere over at Heat Pizza Bar.
Yeah, be sure to tell our pal, 5-star Frank Fleming, we sent you.
That's
from
right.
Talkin Tide as well. 5-star Frank.
Yes.
Going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa for 16 years. The champions of chocolate, Peterbrook. And of course, it is the holiday season. And if you haven't already, place that order, maybe for your office, for your business. They do great, great gifts right there at Peterbrook Chocolatier. Call them at 205 752 0211. Talk to Caitlin, that outstanding staff. They'll get you situated. You still got time, but you need to do it soon. Those gifts that you can order right there from Peterbrook Chocolatier, 205 752 0211. The champions of chocolate, Peterbrook.
All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network, the Twitter feed, Talkin_Tide, live on YouTube, live on Facebook as well, Travis. Got to dive right into the CFP discussion, which you and I have kind of really just kind of stuck our toes in at this point. But this late in the game, no more sticking your toes in the water. Time to dive right in. Huge implications for Alabama elsewhere. The real quick rundown of the other championship games going on and what they might mean for the Crimson Tide. That Pac-12 championship game, Oregon versus Washington. That's the first one to go off. It'll be Friday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. The Big 12 game, Texas versus Oklahoma State, Saturday, 11 a.m. Central Time. Then, of course, you've got Alabama, Georgia kicking off at 3. And then in the evening on Saturday night, the ACC title game, FSU Louisville. That'll be a 7 p.m. Central Time kick. And Michigan, Iowa is going to be playing head-to-head for ratings against that ACC game, Travis. Also a 7 p.m. kick. What are your thoughts, Travis, on how much help Alabama may or may not need from these other games, given if they're able to beat Georgia to make the CFP?
Well, I mean, seeing as how Alabama's sitting there at 8, you got to think they need some at least. And, I don't know what you're really going to get at this point if Oregon knocks off Washington State. Does that really help Alabama, given the committee's seemingly love for the Ducks, even with a resume that, if you put it next to Alabama's, doesn't kind of hold up, I wouldn't think. Look, I've been of the mindset for a while now, and it survived Auburn last Saturday, because obviously if Alabama loses that game, it doesn't matter with 2 losses. But if Alabama got to Atlanta at 11-1 and Georgia got to Atlanta at 12-0, that is the start of the college football playoff. We can talk about championship Saturday this week and Friday, and I'll watch. I'm interested. I'm ready to watch Washington and Oregon. But if we want to talk about a legitimate college football playoff, and if you're trying to envision or tell me about a scenario that doesn't involve the SEC, an SEC rep, then it's not legitimate. It's illegitimate in my concern. It's not valid. You're not validating a true champion. If Alabama beats Georgia and is the team in Georgia's 31-game stretch that has seen the Dogs win 2 national titles in 29 games, if Alabama is that one team that hands Georgia it's only 2 losses in that stretch, and you're going to tell me Alabama's not in this college football playoff, I don't give a damn what else happens anywhere else. I really don't. You're going to tell me Florida State without Jordan Travis is a better team than Alabama in a scenario? I mean,
I get it.
Look, to me, it feels like it's almost more in the lap of the college football playoff. I don't think Alabama should be sweating it as much, or the SEC, as much as that selection committee should be sweating it. Because if Alabama wins, then they got a real problem on their hands.
They got a real problem.
And if they still find it within themselves to keep Alabama out or the SEC out altogether, well, you don't have a college football playoff. You have the NIT of football.
Well, I think what you touched on here is the difference between the 4 best teams right now that ought to be in the playoff versus the whole deserving thing, or some of the
words of Clint Eastwood, deserving's got nothing to do with it.
That's right.
And the unforgiven, right?
In a worst case scenario, well, I mean, the worst case for Alabama certainly is losing to Georgia. That said, if Alabama beats Georgia and gets no help, and you've got an undefeated
it's the committee's
Michigan,
fault. They've kept Alabama down at 8. They could have moved Alabama up, to the top of the 1-loss crew. Yes, even ahead of Texas, and I'll tell you why. Not just because of head-to-head, but Alabama, its last loss, yes, did come to Texas, but that was in late September. We've seen Texas lose since then.
Right.
So it's Alabama that's on more of a heater, if we want to look at it from that standpoint, against better teams, by the way, than what Texas has played.
Better teams, no doubt about it. Here's the way I look at it. I think if Alabama beats Georgia and gets no help, the committee's got a real problem on their hands. Are they going to leave the entire – if Alabama beats Georgia, you don't put Alabama in. You're not putting Georgia in either. You're going to leave the whole SEC out of the playoff?
If Alabama barely beats Georgia, the SEC should get 2. Should get 2. Not 1, not 0, 2. I mean, if we really want to identify the true national champion for
Right.
this college football season, otherwise it's just, look, I love college gymnastics, but the problem I have with a sport like that is it is subjective. It's just, I can watch 20 routines, right? And not be able to tell the difference between a 9.9 and a 10. But
Right.
but they get broken down to 9.975, 9.965. You know, that's what it'll ultimately come down to. The committee desperately needs Georgia just to go ahead, win the game Saturday, and then you're good. The committee
Makes things
really
easier
needed
for 'em.
Alabama to lose last Saturday.
Makes things easier for them if Georgia gets the job done. They're going to be put in a spot, Travis, potentially, where they're going to have to do something they've never done before, right? They've never left an undefeated Power 5 out. They've never left an SEC champion out, right? So if you go by precedent and what they've always done in the past, there are gonna be a couple of factors that are going to weigh against each other. They're going to have to do something they've never done before. Here's what I think. And this is apart from what should happen, because I'm with you on what should happen. I'm just talking about what will happen.
Yeah, no, I won't be surprised if what you're about to say is what actually happens.
I think Alabama had to get in. I think Alabama needs to beat Georgia and get help. And I wrote this earlier today. I think they need help from one other game, and it can come from any of the four. It can come from the ACC game, the Big 12 game, the Pac-12 game, the Big 10 game. If Alabama wins and anybody else among those four catches a loss that would help Alabama, the committee is going to find a way to get Alabama in there. They just are. And the most likely help for Alabama is Oregon over Washington and Louisville over Florida State. Both of those scenarios could easily happen, right? Michigan losing, Texas losing, both of those are unlikely. But I do think that if Oregon beats Washington, I don't think the committee will even blink about jumping Alabama over both of them, Oregon and Washington.
Then why didn't you have Alabama ahead of Oregon already? Why did you go this whole route with Alabama? Not like one spot behind Oregon, right? A couple of spots, couple of 3 spots behind Oregon. And all of this is why I only watch one of the rankings reveal shows. It is a Twitter follow for me on Tuesday nights.
Yep.
It's why I only watched the Sunday after championship, Friday and Saturday.
Boo Corrigan, Travis. That
it
first
is
game,
a pant load for about a month of television.
That's right.
I watch cooking shows on YouTube on Tuesday nights before I watch that horse crap.
I'm with you. I haven't watched a single reveal show all year.
I haven't watched 1 second of one reveal show.
Me neither.
And I look, I get it. I appreciate the interest it creates. The fans have fun. Good. But in terms of what I do or what I care about, nada.
Doesn't mean a thing until the first week of December. All right, before we get out of here, we're going to close out the Tumbler. I've been remiss. I've skipped the Tumbler here the last couple weeks.
Got a lonely Chad in there.
That's right. Did not even bring the Tumbler to Heat Pizza Bar last week when we did a live remote over there. But let's go ahead and get this guy out of here. I guess there's no need to even spin the Tumbler, right? When there's only one. There's only one in there. But what do we have here?
Create some drama, when you do that. That's what the CFP selection committee is going to do Sunday, maybe. Just put them all in a tumbler.
We've got number 74 here in the tumbler. Freshman left tackle Caden Proctor, Travis, a guy who's he's improved a great deal from the beginning of the season. I still see some issues with his play. I think the center position and the left tackle position are the 2 spots that are the biggest concerns for Alabama overall on that offensive line. But he has gotten better, and this coaching staff has figured out a way to get him some help. And look, he's no star over there by any stretch of the imagination. but he's come around some since September for sure.
Yeah, he's not a star yet, and he'll have a challenge this week in Michael Williams uh, for Georgia. But I do think his improvement, while it has taken place, I don't think there's any denying that. I think it also coincided, Chase, with Alabama getting through that first 7 or 8 games where it was more front loaded with edge guys that could be problematic, right?
Right.
Defenses in general that could do that. I know you say that about LSU and you think, what about Harold Perkins? Well, LSU hasn't consistently used Harold Perkins as just a down in, down out edge guy. Kentucky didn't have that kind of guy.
Proctor barely saw Perkins.
Yeah. Chattanooga obviously didn't have that guy. Auburn last week really didn't have an edge guy. And even Georgia, as you mentioned earlier in the show, I don't think as much this week that should be a problem. So it's kind of timed out right. He had to take some lumps against better competition relative to his position in the first 7 or 8 games of the season. And then it kind of lightened up for him. But I do still think, like you said, I think it's obvious that he's made some strides.
All right, that is going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast right here on the Belly Up Podcast Network. Be sure to join Travis and I once again on Sunday night when we recap Alabama's SEC championship game against the Georgia Bulldogs. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Talkin Tide.